Before I start, can I just share? There was one question that I think Cyan asked about stories and AI. What's the role of stories in a world full of AI? So I just want to very, very quickly share something that made me laugh when I saw it. Okay, this is a company called Synthesia, where basically they will turn your text into video with an avatar very, very quickly. And these figures you can see, these humans you can see, supposed humans are not humans, they're avatars. And what they're saying is you don't even need to write your story. You tell it what you want to say, it'll create the text, and then it'll create these lifelike, and they are lifelike, avatars who speak it for you. And they speak it in 140 different languages. So it's incredibly, incredibly clever. But here's what I thought was funny when I saw it. As you scroll down the page, oh, look, there's an avatar pops up trying to sell me stuff. Look, there's testimonials here from companies who use this software. They're all humans, right? These testimonials are not from avatars. Why? Because we don't trust avatars when we're trying to make a complex decision. We don't trust avatars. Of course we don't. We trust humans because we've grown up all our lives trusting humans. So AI is massively clever, and these avatars, I'm not knocking it, they can do 140 different languages. I can't. But in a low trust environment, which is what you're doing when you're selling, you're trying to establish trust in a low trust environment. You're not selling to your mate or your brother, you're selling to complete strangers. In a low trust environment, we don't trust AI. Okay, we trust humans. We need to see humans. And so, that's just my first starting point. Okay, so that made me laugh when I saw that. And what's always really interesting, there's a card in Storyteller Tactics called That's Funny, which is basically about when something makes you laugh, you go, ha, that's funny. It's telling you there's something interesting going on. So pay attention to what makes you go, ha, when you see it. Okay, right. So Carla says, selling personality insights to coaches of elite athletes. So my question to Carla, and to all of you actually on this call, first question is, do you already have customers? Or are you in a situation where you're just starting out in business like I was 10 years ago? I have no customers. Or do you already have customers? So if you already have customers, then the simplest, most effective story you can tell is, look, here's someone I've worked with before. Better still, here's someone like you. Okay. And that's basically saying, okay, here's someone like you. I've helped them before. I can help you too. It's kind of locating your audience as being similar to the person you're already dealing with. And that's kind of, we call those the kind of simple sales stories. And they are really the simplest version, where you point to people you've already worked with and say, okay, this person had this problem. I helped her to deal with it. So I helped this particular coach get the best out of that sprinter. Okay. Now, already when you do that, something very interesting is happening. You are going from your kind of high level skill, right? Your ability to coach, to get personality insights, okay, which is plural. So you get personality insights out of coaches of athletes. All of those things are plural, right? Because you do a lot of them. Because they're plural, they're quite hard to see. What do coaches, plural, look like? What do athletes look like? Well, it could be anything. So you drop it down into a single example. You go, okay, for example, I help Claude. Claude coaches Cecily, who is French tennis champion. Yeah, but she had this kind of thing where she was beating herself up and, okay, I helped him identify what the problem was. And straight away, you're into a little movie running in your head because you've made it into a single example of a actual customer. Now, I don't know whether Carla would find this a challenge in some professions, and obviously psychology and anybody involved in kind of, I suppose you'd say, a caring relationship, or any commercial relationship. There might be issues around commercial confidentiality, and you say, well, I can't talk about customers because, excuse me, I'm going to turn my phone on silent. I can't talk about customers because it's a commercial confidentiality thing. So I can't name them and say what I've done for them because they'll be upset. Okay, that might be the case. In which case, there are two ways around it. The first way is to anonymize. You still make it a personal, individual story of an individual person you've helped, but you make it anonymous. So you say, look, I help coaches. I'm going to call this one Carla. It's not her real name, but I'm, protecting her confidentiality. So Carla came to me because, and you go into the story and it's a single person and you're talking about, but you're not breaching confidentiality. It kind of works as long as you're honest and say, look, Carla's based on a real client, but I'm not going to tell you the name. The other way you can do it, which is very clever, which also protects your client confidentiality, is to go, just imagine you're a coach and you're dealing with a tennis player who's basically letting her anger get the better of her on a court. Okay, well, imagine you throws me into the story. And I go, yeah, okay, I can imagine that. And again, what you're doing is you're telling a little micro story. So Carla, you're telling a small, for example, story about an existing client, an anonymized client, or a relatable scenario that you're throwing your audience into. But you get it down from the broad, from the plurals. I do all these things, for example, into a single story. Right. Okay. Hey, how was that for time, Jacob?
That was really good. You got you got it almost spot on. Can I do a follow-up question then?
Yes, please.
This is from Deshaun, who has an insurance business and is curious how he can use the masterclass to help his clients see the value in life insurance.
Okay. Well, there's probably the moment in, look, what I've said to Carla kind of applies to everyone, that when you can go from, here are the benefits that I bring, which are kind of abstract. Here are the features of my product or service, which are also kind of abstract, into, for example, in this moment, I helped this person do this. Well, that applies to Sean as well, when he's talking about life insurance or anything like that. What I think is quite interesting with topics like life insurance, pensions, making a will, all these kind of big life decisions, lots of us are really bad at facing up to them. So lots of us actually would prefer to do something in the moment, rather than make that long-term plan and commitment. It's very interesting in countries where they have opt-in pensions, life insurance schemes, or opt-out. And in the opt-out versions, many, many, many more people save for their retirement. In the opt-in versions, we're lazy. We don't do what we should do. And I think that's quite interesting, is how do you tap into that? So part of the course, one of the elements of the course is, okay, well, the first element, is, as I said, is finding your simple sales story, which is a, for example, story about an actual customer. Or again, in Sean's case, he might not want to breach client confidentiality, so he's going to make up a scenario. Okay, but it's a single example. So that's the simple sales story. There's another technique in the webinar, which is called Rags to Riches. And what Rags to Riches does is it puts your customer on a journey usually from a kind of bad place, look, I've got a problem, to a good place. I've solved the problem. And that's the really simple version, which is basically, you've got bad breath, here's some mouthwash. Don't have bad breath. It's that simple. But there's another layer deeper than that. It's not just a problem that you're solving. It's an emotional journey. So you're looking at the kind of, okay, you feel a negative emotion and you want to get to a positive emotional state. So it's kind of going deeper than just problem solution. It's bad feeling to good feeling. So you're getting into people, this kind of emotional level with this Rags to Riches version. And so, okay, maybe the negative feeling that Sean's target customers are feeling is a little bit of overwhelm. They kind of know they should be doing this, but they haven't done it yet, and it's a bit, it's a bit confusing, and they feel a bit overwhelmed. And you want to get them to a place where they feel relieved, they feel clarity. That's done. I mean, making a will isn't difficult, and it's that sort of, But maybe maybe the negative place is fear of death, which, let's be honest, is quite a big fear. And the positive place is not, I'm not afraid of dying anymore. It's, at least I've sorted that thing. I can't control when I live or die, but at least I've sorted my will out so the people I leave behind, you get the idea. So that emotional journey in rags to riches is really key. There's a deeper level still with rags to riches, which I think could apply in so many sales stories when you look at it. And it's a kind of psychological journey. So there's a practical journey from problem to solution. There's an emotional journey from pissed off to happy. There's a really deep psychological journey here, which is one of growth, of being overlooked and undervalued to being recognized. Right. And that's a really deep story, and it's like it works. It's the Cinderella story. It's Rocky. It's so many movies follow this pattern, and it works because we were all children once, and we felt overlooked and undervalued. Particularly if, like me, you were the little brother in the family. Okay, and therefore we all would like to be recognised by our peers, by our family, by our loved ones, by other people. So that's really powerful. So in the case of life insurance, well, what's that journey psychologically looking like? Well, maybe it's going from, I am the kind of person who thinks about these things. I do want to look after myself. I do want to look after I do want to make the right decisions. I'm not doing it at the moment, but I'd like to. Okay, to a point where, yeah, I'm the kind of person who's got my house in order. Yeah, I've done the boring stuff, but I've done it right. Now I can get on with the good stuff. So that's the sort of, look, I'm the one who's got this sorted. Look at me, aren't I good? Which is the kind of the deeper, if you like, psychological journey from being undervalued to being recognized. And I think that can apply in all kinds of ways. So it'd be interesting to think, okay, so in Ryan's case, Ryan asked about being able to give good financial advice to parents who are struggling to get their kids into the right college.
Quick question, Steve.
Yeah.
You use a particular word about how someone would feel on the rags to riches journey.
Yes.
What was that word? Was it relieved?
Oh, relieved, yes. So relief is huge. So there's kind of nagging doubt or anxiety on the emotional journey, nagging doubt, anxiety, overwhelmed, to clarity, relief. Whew, thank God I've got that sorted out. When you finish, if you've not made a will, by the way, you should make one. When you've made your will, it does feel like that's one thing I don't want to think about that I don't have to think about, which is quite nice. Okay, so Ryan, I'm just going to jump around my list of stories. Ryan was asking about financial advice for parents who are trying to get their kids into good college. Well, that is the perfect opportunity to tell a rags to riches story, because childhood, anyway, is growing up and going from this kind of little undervalued little speck into a proper grown up. Anything that involves education, anything that involves training. So Solly is also trying to sell training courses. Benjamin is selling a school for podcasters. So Benjamin and Solly, as well as Ryan, you're really hitting the rags to riches aspect here, because you're giving people the chance to develop and to shine. Yes. So they've got the right intention. They want to get their kids into college. They want to do good podcasts. They want to do. They want to be trained in the nuclear power industry, which is about as important as it gets, really. Okay, so they've got the right intention, but they don't know where to start. Or they don't know how to go about it. They don't know if they've got all the skills they need. By the end of the journey, they have got those skills. They have made that progress, and that's a deeply, deeply satisfying experience. Now, the trick is, here's the great thing about story. So that story structure, as we said before, I'm just going to sketch it for you on a piece of paper. That story structure, we call it rags to riches, and it goes very much like a kind of, bad place to good place. Now, what's really clever about story structures, once you learn how to use them, is, right, well, you can tell this story backwards, as in the past. So here we are now, in the present, right? In the past, this person went from here, and now she's here, okay? With a big smiley face. Yes? So you're telling the story about the past. So here's a customer I worked with, for real. When she came to me, her kid was in school but worrying about college. Now she feels like a top-class mum because she's got her child into the college that that child deserved. So, okay, that's a story in the past. The same structure works if you tell a story forwards and you go, well, look, here we are now where you've got this problem. If you follow my training course, here's where you could be at the end of it. So that's what's great about story structures. Stories work told backwards about the past, but almost exactly the same structure works told forwards about the future. In fact, the same parts of the brain are involved in both memory and planning, involves the same aspects of the brain. It's very visual, it's about people, it's about emotions. Those centers of the brain are active when we're remembering stuff that's actually happened and when we're pondering stuff that might happen in the future. It's the same parts of the brain, and we're thinking in, well, scientists call it the scenario network, which is basically we think in scenarios, but that's just scientists. We think in stories. So when you're talking about the past, you tell a story. When you're projecting into the future, you tell a story. Now, the key thing is you have to be clear with your customers which one you're doing. If you tell a story about the past, say, for example, boom, here's what happened. If you tell a story about the future, you say, just imagine. Here's what could happen. And you have to make it plausible. Otherwise, we're just not going to believe it. If you say, look, just imagine, Ryan is talking to parents trying to get their kids into college. You say, well, listen, just imagine you could go out and buy a lottery ticket and win the lottery and get your kid into whatever college you like. And you're just going to sit there going, yeah, that's not going to happen. So you've just blown your credibility. Like nobody can listen to a word you say because you haven't been plausible in your scenario.
Steve, I'm gonna jump in now and
timing.
I think there's a question from Sion. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Sion. I think this was a question you're actually referring to about pip decks in general from your comment in the general chat. I think something that Steve's demonstrated here already about how AI is going to work with pip decks. I think people are already using the card content and they're feeding it into ChatGPT or Claude and helping them build things out. But I think the thing you have to remember with AI is the output's only as good as the input. So whilst a pip deck card or a framework from Storyteller Tactics can absolutely set off your AI in the right direction, such as, hey, use rags to riches to help me do blah, blah, blah. But the critical ingredient in AI actually being a useful tool is you and your ability to see the story that's in front of you, to go and speak to customers and get the stories out of them. Like AI isn't going to do that for you. AI isn't going to be able to have that, oh, that's funny kind of moment that humans can have. So, there's a stance that I have on AI, which is that it is a tool, and the humanness is only going to become more and more important. And to be honest, this is why we're doing more of this kind of event. We want to be real people speaking to you. We don't want to be like always behind an email or a landing page. We have people saying this wasn't a problem when we first started, but now people are saying, aren't pip decks, surely someone could just go and generate a pip deck with AI. And it's like, well, technically, yeah. But, Negotiation Tactics is a new deck we launched earlier this year. That was written by a hostage negotiator who's negotiated with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The insights in there just don't exist from an AI who's just telling you what you kind of want to hear about negotiation advice.
I mean, if you've been kidnapped and you realize that an AI is running the negotiation, you'd be really pissed off.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, the thing is about AI, and again, it's high trust, low trust environments. In a high trust environment where the AI is delivering simple technical information in 140 different languages, right? And it's basically, there's no challenge. It's just technical information, and you trust where the information is coming from, and all you need to do is get it quickly. AI is going to do that okay. In a low trust environment where you don't know where the information is coming from, it's VUCA, it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment you're in. No, absolutely no way you're going to trust AI. So hostage negotiating is VUCA. VUCA world times 1,000. You do not want an AI, frankly, doing anything other than delivering really basic translation and simple information. And I can tell these days, I can tell when stuff is written with AI, and it actually gets me pissed off when I read AI copy, because I just think, come on, this is like, it's like turning up on a first date with plastic roses. It's cheap.
Yeah,
So,
I always think if you're too lazy to write it, I'm too lazy to read it, to be honest with you.
yeah.
So that's what I think with the AI storytelling. We've got a great question from
Yes.
Devin, which I really want to get round to.
Because-
So Devin runs a coaching program for young adults that helps them figure out what they want to do with their life by using their natural personality type as a guide. How can I introduce this concept to schools and parents, because they are the gatekeepers that purchase the program? I find that fascinating.
Well, I mean, look, talk about relatability. There's a fantastic, I don't know if you've seen the TED Talk that's done by Sir Ken Robinson. It's the most watched TED Talk ever. And he talks about how schools are failing. And he said, it's really interesting, again, this is the use of irony as a hook. And he said, it's really funny, it's really ironic. If you go to a dinner party, right, and you tell people you work in education, that you are a teacher, right, it just everyone's going, oh, geez, why am I sitting next to the teacher? Right, it just kills conversation stone dead. If you ask them about their time at school, they can't stop talking. Right, so how do you talk to parents about a kind of new way of hacking into, or a new way of approaching tailored education? By let's talk about personality types, let's talk about archetypes. Okay, you do it by asking them about their education first. So when you were at school, did anyone ever ask you how you liked to learn? Well, they probably didn't, because you just got stuck in a row of chairs and got told to get on with it. So that's quite a nice way in. So in this case, what you're doing is you're all the time with these stories, you're trying to make a bridge, you're trying to make a connection, and say, look, I do something here for people like you. The closer you can get with the people like you, the better. So the easiest thing to sell is, well, actually the easiest thing to sell is the same thing to the same person who's bought it already. That's the simplest sell. The next easiest thing is, I sold this to your twin brother. He liked it. I bet you're going to like it too. Right? That's probably the easiest sell. But you know, so this works for this group of parents. Really enjoy this. I think you'll enjoy it too. This works for these 15-year-olds. You've got a 15-year-old. I think it'll work for you too. It's that sort of, so it's a combination of audience awareness. Yeah. Who are you speaking to? What do they need? So that kind of niching down is good. You can't sell to everyone at once. So niching down is good. Knowing what you're selling, who you're selling to, how you're helping them, right? That's kind of basic marketing. But you add into that, okay, here's someone like you who I've already sold to. I mean, there'll be some really interesting, hopefully we'll get a chance to come on to it, that question of, what do I do if I don't have any customers yet, which we can come on to later, because it's kind of, well, there are similar things. A lot of it is about social proof. Okay, so we've touched on a few questions. We've touched on a few things that are in the course. Where should we go to next, Jacob?
We've got another one from I believe, a different Paul, and I'd love to get both yours and Charles' perspective on this.
Yep.
So, hi Steve, I'm Paul from Dublin, and I'm launching a men's sleepwear brand. I'd love your advice on structuring the story for an about us page versus a product page. Does storytelling even make sense on a product page, or should it be more bullet point on a product page?
Well, I think storytelling on the product page is actually quite kind of simple. It's like, here's a customer like you who likes this shirt, or here's a customer like you who likes these trousers, and you know, that's kind of visually what we're doing all the time when we use clothing models. I mean, very few people sell clothes without people in them. You know, you don't sell a shirt by showing a photograph of a shirt. You sell a shirt by selling a photograph of a person wearing the shirt. And what's really interesting is when you look at eye tracking software, so there's software that monitors where your eyes are looking at on the page, right? The thing we look most at is the face we look at the face of the model or the person wearing the shirt. Even though we're not buying faces, we're buying shirts, but we actually spend most of our time looking at the face, because we just can't stop hoovering up social information about humans. We just love it. Okay, so in the product page, it's, look, here's the product, yes, but obviously here's the product and the person wears the product. And there's obviously two types of photograph. There's your kind of high-end, really nicely shot fashion shoot photo with model wearing clothes, wearing shirt. But there's also the much like lower res, like, customer shot selfie of, okay, here's a real person who also buys this and looks good in it and loves it. Well, of course, that's on the product page. Well, that's not what Paul was asking. Paul was asking about the About Us page. Well, this is really interesting, and it is the place where you can. So, storytelling on the product page is simple sales story. Yeah, here's customers like you who like this shirt. On the About Us page, it does give you a chance to go a little bit deeper and to talk about what motivates you as a founder, particularly founders, or as a member of this company. What are you driven by? What are you motivated by? And there's a kind of, just as there is we talked about the rags to riches pattern of storytelling, there's a rags to riches story about a customer who goes on a journey with your product, with your help. There's also the same structure works as your founder story. Well, I had an idea for a business, right? And now I've got a business. And somewhere along the way, there were the usually ups and downs, but also, yeah, okay, I know we start businesses to make money, unless you're working in the social enterprise or charity sector. But if you're working in the commercial sector, yes, money is a motivator, but it's not a very reliable guide to your character. In fact, if you just go on about money, you come off as greedy, and we don't really like greedy. But if, clothing brands, look at Patagonia as an example of a clothing brand that talks an awful lot about social responsibility, about the environment, about not using low-cost labor. That's their About Us story. And what they're trying to do is develop a personality for the company. So a brand is basically just applying a personality to a corporate entity. Now, there's a whole set of stuff which we haven't touched on about archetypes and brand building, and there's brand tactics as well. So there's all sorts of things there. But essentially, I think if as a founder, or as a founder, you can tell a kind of journey story of your own on your About Us page, it helps us get a feeling of who you are and what you like to work with. It helps us establish a sense of personality, and we like personalities. We break the world up into personalities. Like, can
I jump in here, Steve, quickly?
Yeah,
on the About page. So, About pages have a special kind of place in my heart. I don't know why, but
I always read them.
They're the most visited page on any website, and I think it's the most valuable page on any website. And you go and read our About page and try and see what story framework we're using there, because the whole purpose of the About page is to tell your story. Like, that is the one place where someone expects to read a story, and it really pays to show the transformation, that kind of rags to riches story. You can even switch that and it can be more of a man on the whole kind of thing. Like, it's not necessarily rigid in exactly what kind of structure you use, but the whole point is you're showing the transformation that you had that makes you a trustworthy guide for what you're selling elsewhere on the website. So I think your question about, like, does storytelling even make sense here? Should I do this kind of thing here? The storytelling's happening across the whole website. The website is like this theme park of different rides, of different types of storytelling happening. And the About page is like the main event of, like, here's the story of why we're here, why we exist, why you should trust us. But there's a big mistake people make on the About page, and they try and sell you stuff on the About page. The About page is only doing one thing, which is someone knowing what your story is so that they build trust with you. The product page is where you tell the story. There are like micro stories everywhere on a product page. Like, oh, is this going to fit me? And answering that question is like, well, people who have reported, you see on some shoe websites where it's like, some people have reported this as being a wider than normal fit. Like, there's a little story there, and you're kind of answering it. And that's when you can use bullet points. So the formatting, is really just the mechanism that you're delivering stuff in. And as Steve said, the main story you're telling on the product page, the more testimonials and more social proof you have, the better. Like, have you ever bought a t-shirt or anything on a website where it said 0 reviews? I highly doubt it. So that's the thing that makes you take that punt. Like, the only reason that we can sell Stories That Sell is that we have the credibility behind us of people that have already been through that process, and we can share those testimonials. But I really appreciate that question, Paul. We'll move on now to Omar, and I'll read it out for you, Steve. I already bought Stories That Sell.
Okay.
I have an online entrepreneurship program for children 8 to 14 years old.
Oh, brilliant.
I have 20 clients. What kind of stories should I tell?
Yep.
My ads are seen by parents and they buy the course. How do I get their attention?
Okay. Look, I think this is a really interesting one, Omar, because it comes back to that thing we were talking about with Carla before about, you have to be super careful with children, identifying children online. So I think this is a really great example of where you would turn it from with almost everyone else in business, the best story you can tell is, here's a customer who loves this product. Better still, here's a customer like you who loves this product. It's very hard to do with children. And I think that you're then into that other world we're talking about, which is either anonymizing and saying, look, here's a 9-year-old, let's call him Charlie. Okay, it's not his real name, but because you just can't put kids into an online space in that with it safely, I don't think. Or you do it. Okay, remember when you were 9 years old and you had pocket money? What did that feel like? So you're putting the parent back into the place of the child and from their childhood. And this is the great thing: kids can't imagine what it's like to be a grown-up, but grown-ups can remember what it's like to be a child. So I think that's a really good way of approaching that, Omar, is to say, look, go back to your childhood. One interesting thing about story, and I say this to people, not so much. Oh wait, look, storytelling is storytelling, whether you're selling or just kind of talking about your sort of holiday to your mates. One of the things you're looking for is an emotional reaction from the person who's listening. Facts and awareness raising do not elicit an emotional reaction. If anything, they make people feel bored. If you give people a bunch of facts, it's like you're asking them to do homework, and that's not a good feeling. So you're always thinking, right, what is the emotional kind of response I hope to get from what I'm saying? And in this case, nostalgia. Nostalgia is a really powerful emotion. It's like warm remembering of things gone past. Yeah, so that sort of, where were you? What did you spend your pocket money on? Did you wish you had more? And how did all that sort of thing taps into a really deep, positive emotional well of nostalgia. So that's a really interesting way to think about the hook when you're thinking about, okay, how do I get people's attention? Well, think in emotional terms. So you can work with positive emotions. Nostalgia, curiosity, joy, surprise, wonder. Yeah. How could a 9-year-old turn $5 into $450 in 3 weeks? Right.
Okay, I need to hear that story now. Like, I know you made that up. I
did just, I made it up, but I now want to know how a 9-year-old did it, and why can't I do it? So that's sort of, so those are positive emotions that you're tapping into as your hook, and then of course the story comes after the hook. You can also work with negative emotions. Negative emotions, like 3 words. Here you go. Young people today, right? That will tap into a whole load of sort of, anxiety, dismissiveness, whatever, about young people today, because old people always do that. My first experience of coming across a I remember reading Plato when I was 19 years old, and in Plato they're complaining about young people today in ancient Greece, and I just thought that's fantastic. I love that. So yeah, so there's negative emotions you can tap into, there's positive emotion you can tap into. Those act as your attention hook, and then you go in with a story. But in your case, you have to have an anonymized story, because you can't use a story of real children, I would suggest. And then we have to trust you that you're not just making it up, that this has actually happened. Okay, so that would be go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's great. I'm just going to move on to Connor, because I really want to get to this question, because this one, I really like this.
Yep.
So should each story have an offer attached to the end? Or can you just use a story to get your audience invested and later on make an offer? For example, a story written on my welcome to the newsletter email with an offer made on the next email to follow.
Listen, guys, this is your area of expertise, really.
Yeah.
When I'd say yes,
this one.
Yeah, go on, Charles.
So I don't know if you've got Stories That Sell already, or you've seen the webinar with the Jolt to Jackpot framework, but for anyone that hasn't, the Jolt to Jackpot framework effectively follows you through a hook, a story, and an offer. And it's this way of getting someone's attention, taking them through a transformational story that builds trust, and then presenting them an offer that feels like a jackpot. And it's something that is like, there's a spectrum to it. There's like, when we run the Stories That Sell Masterclass, like, we are putting the offer of buying the Stories That Sell Masterclass at the end. We're putting an offer to you. But if you go and look at our About page, there doesn't appear to be an offer, but there is certainly one there, but it's just not at the same kind of volume as like a buy this thing now offer. And that offer is to go and connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm kind of giving you this opportunity to, actually connect with me after reading my story. And so, yeah, I think you can add an offer with everything. And that offer is like, go and do this thing. It's this call to adventure, or this kind of engagement creating thing. I don't know if any of you are following me on LinkedIn, but I make a habit to ask a question at the end of every post. And that's almost the offer part. It's like, right, you've kind of trust what I'm saying now, because I've given you the story, I've hooked you in, you've read the story, and now my offer to you is like, let's talk about it.
It's also as simple as, like, in our emails, the call to action can be as simple as keep an eye out for our next one, and you can tease up. So your welcome flow campaign that you're talking about, you can literally have, and keep an eye out for your inbox, because next week I'm going to talk about the time I fell down the stairs. Like, that can be as simple as that, and it just hooks you in. It can be a very, very subtle call to action. It doesn't have to be a hard sell. Yeah.
I'm going to move on to another question. I think we might have skipped over it, from Paul.
Oh yes, about the charity walk.
Yeah. So quickly want to fundraise in memory of a dear friend, collecting stories from friends. But I think this kind of ties into the offer thing. Is we want to share these stories to be fun, evocative, and entertaining, but somehow also encourage that donation. I think the context of that, Paul, is that if someone has actually watched through those stories that you're sharing, the kind of 80-20 rule here of like where you put your effort in to get the maximum kind of impact is the art of curating the best stories and making them really interesting and funny, because the ask at the end, like, can just be a really straight down the middle, like, please donate to help raise for this thing, right? I don't think you need to do anything clever at the end of it. Focus on just the fun, evocative, entertaining story. I think you're already on the right track. The fact that you're even thinking this way means I think you're going to be fine with this fundraiser. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Steve, before we move on to the next one.
Really clever trick. I mean, there's all sorts of things that charities do, but a really clever device I saw someone do once is just say, look, it's the price of a cup of coffee. What does a cup of coffee cost you nowadays? £3.95, £4. Cup of coffee and a biscuit, £5.
Or a pint,
Well, yeah, a pint of beer is more than £5. No, a cup of coffee and a biscuit, for the price of that, you can make a little bit of difference. So bringing it down to that kind of, again, when you're saying, so money is kind of abstract. and we don't like spending it. But actually, giving up a latte that I don't really need and a biscuit I certainly don't need brings it down into sort of a little concrete moment of, okay, yeah, I can do without a biscuit today. Yeah, so that's what I'd add. But I think Charles is right. I think and it's really interesting. If you look at sites like GoFundMe, and it is it's the kind of there's I think two things that really work. One is the kind of the nature of the effort you're doing. So Captain Tom, the UK case of a 99-year-old man walking round and round his garden with his walking frame, was a hugely powerful during lockdown. Was a hugely powerful kind of emotional attention grabber because of the nature of the task and the person doing it. But equally, you don't have to sort of do crazy things. The emotion is really powerful. So the emotion, people's recollections of the person who's passed away. Can I jump to one I've spotted, a story that I think is really interesting, which I think is from Sar, if I'm pronouncing your name right, Sar Yavin, about Maxi Milk. This is, so if I can just read it. Upstate New York, running Maxi Milk, a company that helps dairy farmers improve their genetics. I'm assuming you mean the genetics of the cows, not the genetics of the farmers, and their profits. Using high-end genetic evaluation, embryo transfer, I'm sure you're talking about cows now, to promote the dairy farm. For selling now, here's an interesting thing. We're facing difficulties selling the idea to very conservative audiences. Right. What's the best way to tackle this situation and engage the farmers? Okay, so this is really, really interesting. There's a long history of studies done on why certain innovations get adopted rapidly and others don't. And actually, the first studies were done in agriculture around the kind of what they call the Green Revolution in the 1960s. And it wasn't uniform. Certain farmers adopted very quickly, and others resisted the use of new chemicals and new seeds and all this kind of thing. And yes, there can be some very conservative attachment to the old ways, particularly in farming, because of that connection to the land and to nature. Okay. The important thing here is to understand where your target customers sit in terms of their attitude to innovation, because not everyone is the same. And you get the early adopters and the pioneers who actually seek out new things. They're curious about new things, and they will try new stuff. This is in all walks of life. So in my case, I'm quite an early adopter. I will try new food. I've got a fridge full of jars of pastes and pickles, because I go, ooh, when I see it on the shelf and go, I've not tried that before, and I'll go and buy it. Okay, in the farming world, there'll be farmers who very early on adopted GPS as a way of seeding their land, or very early on adopted, so they'll be kind of cutting edge. And then, as you rightly identify, there are other farmers who just are resistant to anything that feels too radical, too different, too risky. Right? The pioneers generally have got more money, they've got more resource, they've got a little bit of spare. Therefore, they can take a risk on something that doesn't work. They've got more money, and they're temperamentally more interested in new things. The resistors, traditionalists, they would be typically have less spare. They can't take a risk on stuff that might not work. And temperamentally, they might be, as you said, more conservative with a small c. What you find works here is, yes, it's a kind of version of the simple sales story where you're saying, look, here's a customer like you who buys this product or uses this technology. But you're actually working out that the people you're dealing with are along a spectrum of pioneer to resistor. And what you have to do is work your way incrementally along that spectrum. So there's no point talking to a resistor and saying, look, here's a pioneer. Look, here's the Elon Musk of dairy, who's like smashing it in the genetics world. That's just not going to work, because that temperamental and the temperament's different. The resource situation is different. They're not going to take a risk. So you basically try to work your way slowly up the innovation curve. And so, yes, if you have pioneers who are already using this technology because they're excited about the potential, Okay, your next step is to get the early adopters to go, hey, look at these pioneers, look what they're doing.
Can I throw something in there, Steve? I think there's a key component that I think is worth kind of saying out loud, is that for the people that are resisting, the conservative audiences, there is, again, with like that crossing the chasm early adopters thing.
Yes.
For the kind of like, I don't know what the middle's called, but there's like the late adopters, but then there's like the big fat middle of the people that eventually
mainstream.
The mainstream, yeah. Or the late adopters in the mainstream, they only buy because like they'll get left behind if they don't.
There's a little bit, yes, there's two things. There's two messages for those guys. One is you'll be left behind if you don't. And the other is it's safe.
Yes. And there's that, there's the FOMO, but then there's the hesitation objection.
Yep.
And the best way to address hesitation and objections is with testimonials and social proof. Like, look at this dairy farm, they did it, look at the results they've had. If you don't do this, this is what's going to happen to you.
But you have to understand that the further out you go into the traditionalist resistor end, showing them some fancy scientific, trendy farmer who jumps at every new thing is not going to work yet. You have to work your way towards it. So early adopters look at stories of pioneers. Late adopters look at stories of early adopters. Traditionalists look at stories of late adopters. So it's a kind of step thing, and very few companies leap from pioneer to resistor quickly. It's a slow build.
Cool. Thank you very much, Steve. I'm just going to quickly jump to a question from Chelsea about how can I get effective engaging testimonials if I don't have clients yet.
Yeah.
So there is a bonus for that. There's a whole thing in the Stories That Sell Masterclass bonuses about that. But Steve, I was wondering if you could touch on something that might help Chelsea.
Yeah, well, look, we've all been in this position. I mean, Charles was there with his first ever deck of workshop tactics. I was there when I left a steady job and became a freelance and a consultant, and I had no customers. And so you end up at that stage in your career giving stuff away for free. Because what you're trying to get is actually you're trying to get feedback. Is this any good? I think it's good. Is it any good? So you actually have to give stuff away for free. Free samples in the product world, free information in the service world. And so of course, free isn't free. So look, and you're still asking people to give you their time and attention. So what you're doing when you're at that stage is you're basically testing the market, testing the product, and giving stuff away free and spending time with people for nothing, except what you're going to ask for back at the end is, well, two things. First of all, feedback. Is this working? Is it good? Second thing, story. So if you tried this free sample and you liked it, pardon me, can you recommend me on LinkedIn? Can you write a review? What is, so you're trying to build up, and then you've got, even though those were freebies you were giving away, those freebies, those prototypes, those tests are your first customer stories. They're not really customers because they weren't paying, but you get the idea. They're the first story. Then you can go to actual paying customers and say, look, I've tested this with all these people here. They actually really like it. Are you interested? So it's about lowering the risk by social proof. So yes, I think every business that starts up, you do a kind of whole bunch of test phases where you're just trying it and asking people to try it. There are three ways, I think, to get people to kind of, when they don't know anything about your product. There are three ways to get them to try. And remember, even if it's free, they're still giving you their time. Okay, so the first one is it's free. Okay. The second one, it's new. All right. So this is basically like when you're talking to the pioneers and early adopters, hey, this is new. This is exciting. No one's ever done this before. Do you want to be first? And for that end of the market, the pioneers and early adopters, that might work. The third, so it's free, it's new, it's improved. Right? So you're basically saying, look, this is like this thing you already know, but better. So when Airbnb came on the market, this is like booking a hotel, but better, because it's not a hotel, it's somebody's actual house. So this is like going on holiday, but better. So you know how to book a hotel, you're actually booking somebody's house. Right? So it's improved on what you already know. So those 3 ways: new, free, new, improved.
Great. Thanks very much, Steve. And we've got a bunch more. I don't know how much time do we have left, Jacob?
I mean, we just had it for an hour, so maybe we can squeeze one more in, just
Yeah,
for a treat.
Try and do a couple more. Yeah, let me have a look.
I'll let Steve rifle through. Q&A. Sorry, next time we do one of these, get your question in early because we're trying to, go from first to last. So
yeah,
sorry if we didn't answer your question today, but hopefully some of the answers have been helpful, seeing how it might apply to you. Have you got one, Steve?
Well, I was looking at Tom Husbands. It's quite a detailed one. It says, I'm responsible for pitching our company, which is an event management agency. These are often pitches responding to large global requests for pitch from multi-million-dollar accounts. A slide deck can reach over 100 slides and cover a range of services, answering a large number of key points. Okay. And some of it is quite prescriptive and responding to specific questions. I'm struggling with the storytelling aspect. Okay. Should it be one story weaved throughout or lots of little stories in each section? Okay. Well, I would say when you get to the stage of writing a 100-page document, then assuming you're not using AI to churn it out and it's actually based on real experience, I guess it's a question of what are you doing in that pitch. I can't believe you're not reading a 100-page document out loud. So there's a certain element of it of look, you go, look, here's the document you asked for. It's 100 pages long. You can ask me anything, test me on anything in here, right? So, or take it away and read it, or maybe they've read it before you get there. I don't know, but you're certainly not going to sit there and read 100 pages. You'd just be killing yourself. In terms of, that's not what people are there for. They're there for a conversation. So I guess my advice would be, in terms of the story aspect, 2 things. First of all, think about, okay, what is our number 1 USP? What are we most proud of? Or maybe number 2, number 3. 3 USPs where you go, look, we are better than the competition because we get this right, we always do this, we never do this. Okay. And for each of those, you can go, for example, boom, into a single moment in time where a thing happened. Okay. So that's first bit of advice would be make sure you have, for example, stories to back up every point that you think is important in that conversation. Okay. Second thing I think is interesting is, and again, it's into that sort of when you're trying to establish trust, and you're competing with other people, and they're all saying they're great. Everyone's saying they're great. Okay. How do you talk about mistakes? How do you talk about stuff that's gone wrong? And it's an interesting thing to do in a pitch. How do you talk about setbacks? Because there's a temptation to just be positive all the time. The problem with positive, and so that, as I showed you before, that rags to riches story arc, which is in the webinar, is a positive. Like, you've got a problem, we've got the solution, yay! The problem with that is it can sound too optimistic. It can sound, we say, in English, we say, that sounds too good to be true. And so the danger is you're going, look, we can do this amazing thing. You've got a problem, we can solve it. Yeah. And your audience is going, yeah, well, I'm not quite sure I believe that. Especially if you overhype. And AI is great at overhyping everything. So if you oversell, then the reaction is actually, I don't quite believe you. And so what you're trying to think about is, okay, well, how do I bring that back into a kind of roller coaster story arc? And this is in there's a part of the course called Pitch Perfect, where it goes, okay, there's a problem, negative. There's an opportunity to do something here. Yeah, work with us and we can do these amazing things. That's positive. But you bring people back down again. You don't just go, okay, so we can do amazing things, just book us, right? No, you bring them back down again into, look, here's the practical things that are going to be difficult. Here's what could go wrong. Here's what's gone wrong in the past. Yeah. I mean, look, if you're doing event management, I used to I used to run events for the BBC way back, and what is there's so many things can go wrong. Number one, running a live event outdoors in Manchester, Northern England, was the weather. Yeah, and it could go horribly wrong. Okay, so you can't just approach that with like, it's okay, fingers crossed, everything's gonna be fine. No. You've got a contingency plan, and your contingency plan and your ability to deal with stuff going horribly wrong, the roller coaster, it's going down here, that's actually what you're getting paid for. Yeah, you're not getting paid to promise great stuff. You're getting paid to deal with anything that comes, and to deal with it in such a way that is safe, that delivers the experience the client's paying for, and that that people come away from the event thinking that was fantastic. And so talking about the bad stuff, the hard stuff, the difficult stuff, the tricky stuff, I think that's if you're trying to sort of weigh the weight and value of story in terms of what you're trying to get across. You're trying to get across, well, features and benefits, yes, trust. You're trying to get across trust and experience and insight, and I am a safe pair of hands. Okay, well, stories of things going wrong that you fix are probably the single best way you can do that. So I think when you're thinking about that conversation where you've got a book of here's a book of 100 pages of stuff that you asked for that we've done, we're not going to sit and read it to you, but let's pick out on. So you can do. I say that. Well, two things. I said three things. One is your USPs. What are you most proud of? For example, story. Second thing would be actually to say, what's the client most scared of? What are they most worried about? Right. For example, we can fix that. We can, we're good at that. Third one is, what do you do when things go wrong? Right. And I think those three stories carry the kind of, you're getting maximum bang for your buck. You're getting maximum trust for your time with those three stories. So you're building maximum trust. I'm
going to wrap you up now because we're over time.
Yeah.
I want to respect everyone's time who might be hoping this wraps up as well, because we promised you an hour and we've given you an hour. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. Please go and check out the Stories That Sell Masterclass. There's a bunch of information. If there's anything on there that you feel like hasn't answered your question that you have about the masterclass, please shoot me an email, charles@piptex, and I'll help answer it for you. But yeah, this has been really great. We'll share this recording afterwards. So if you're wanting to go back and listen to some of the stuff, we'll send a recording out. Thank you so much for your amazing questions. This is really great. It's so much of a pleasure to be able to actually speak with you all and hear your questions. It's been really cool. And just to hear the different range of kind of problems you guys are facing with storytelling. And we will do more of these things. And so if you do feel like you have a burning question unanswered, drop it in our Slack channel as well. If you go to piptex.com/community, join our Slack channel. We hang out in there and answer questions in there. So please go ahead and join up. And have a great evening, morning, lunchtime, wherever you are. And we'll see you on the next one.
Amazing. Thanks so much, everyone.
And if you come on the next one and your question wasn't answered on this one, give yourself an extra star. We'll get to you next time.
Good shout.